Yisborach, Yom Rishon, Parshas Bo. Tiferes, Avigdor. Today's shir sponsored for Shlema Shmaryo Yosef Ben Yisroel Ben Pesha Miriam Choshech Shar Chayli Yisroel. Today, the shir is going to be extremely appropriate. We are sitting here in a blackout, and I prepared the shir before the blackout. The shir is on Makas Choshech. They say there's not going to be light till tomorrow morning. Yosef came to Mitzrayim. Yosef made Mitzrayim into an empire. Yosef brought together all of the money from the Gans Eretz Mitzrayim. Can't imagine how much that was. Yosef brought together all the money from Eretz Canaan. It says in the Pasuk. And Yosef was malakit this money, and he brought it all to the coffers of Parshas. In addition, Yosef was malakit all the behemoths and brought it to Mitzrayim also. Mitzrayim had a wealth of behemoths. Now, when the Makas of Dever came and all the animals died, the effect was monstrous. What was the effect of the death of all the behemoths? You realize, number one, in those days, the means of transportation was by animals. Animals pulling wagons. And the transportation in this empire was disrupted. When transportation is disrupted in the empire, that's a very big disruption. Besides, for all the other uses of animals that they had. But that's not a luxury, that's a very fundamental something. Then came Shchin. Shchin, you imagine a person having a sick child. If you ever had a child with chickenpox, you know it becomes a preoccupation. You're running to the doctor, you're running to another doctor, you're preoccupied. And here, wherever you went, to any medical facility, any place you went, the doctor is busy, he's looking for his own doctor. Everybody, what are you calling for? The lines out of the urgent care centers and out of the doctors were out the door, and the doctor himself was on the same line. So all of the medical, which is a fundamental part of an infrastructure of any society. And then comes Barad, and that's a tremendous disruption in weather. All of a sudden, we have strong winds, we have tremendous destruction, hurricanes, tornadoes, we have stuff, this very unusual blocks of hail, fire, landing exactly, not being wasted, it's landing exactly on specific targets. marked targets, and it's causing forest fires and house fires. It's unbelievable what it caused. The destruction, unbelievable. And whatever was built up by Yosef was now totally disrupted and totally destroyed. Now we have Makas Choshech. That seems to be a pretty strange Makkah in this series of destruction. What was Makas Choshech? 3 days of darkness and 3 days you were stuck in bed. I'm sure a few guys over here would be very happy we had a particular Makas Choshech. I'm sure some of you may have thought today we're getting back when the lights went out. Oh, now I have a good excuse not to learn today, good excuse to get up. I don't have to get up tomorrow morning. First, you get a little sense of feeling like that. What was so being fair of Makas Choshech? It seems not to be in line with the instruction. Makas B'chayros, I understand. You finally kill every family. You take the life of individuals. That's it. But Choshech seems to be a shtickle funny thing. So in the Gemara, the Medrash, it says as follows: Choshech Lama Hevi Alei. So the Gemara said, the Chazal tell us, Yisbarach Shemoi Shal HaKadosh Baruch Hu She'ein Lefonav Masay Ponim. Hashem doesn't take Sheichat. V'hu Choyker Leiv U'boichen Klois. He is Choyker the Levavos. He checks out people's innards. And he sees what's tutzach innovating, what's going on inside of people. Lefisha hoyu poishim b'Yisroel. They were poishim b'Yisroel. Shahoyalem patroinim min hamitzriyim. There were people, even among the Jews, who had what's called Egyptian connections. And they had Oisher, the Kavod, and they didn't want to go out. Amra HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Im avi aleihen Makkah b'farhesya, if I'm going to bring upon them a Makkah b'farhesya, and they're going to die, so the Mitzrayim will say, Kishem sha'avar aleinu kach avar aleinu. Just like we get punished, they get punished. Lefikach hevi al ha-Mitzrayim es ha-choshech shloisha yomim, kedei sheyu kavrin meiseihem, and they shouldn't see them. Now we have to understand this, because the Chayra, at first glance, this Medrash is saying there were some Rishonim, some what you call Jews, who belonged to the Judenrat, the Judenrat in Germany they had in Europe, Jews who were friendly with the Germans, and they served the Germans, and they had, till their British put in the Germans' minds to kill them, they had some space. But that would sound like, was that most of the people? How many people was that? Now if you take a look in the Pasuk, in the beginning of next Parsha, it says, V'chamushim olu v'nei Yisroel me'eretz Mitzrayim. The Bnei Yisroel came up chamushim. And the Chazal tell us, what does chamushim mean? What does chamushim mean? Chamushim means, one says, echad mi chamish. Now what does that mean, echad mi chamish? 1 out of 5. What percentage is that, Ezra Aaron? What percentage of that, of Jews that went out of Mitzrayim? 20%. 20%. Very good. Another month, I want to get the next one over. then it says, Echad mechamish, right? One of 50. How much percent is that? But show you how much percent that is? Echad mechamish. What grade did you go through? How much percent is that? I asked you how much percent is that? 2%. That's 2% went out. And one said it was 1 of 500. That means of every Jew that went out, 500 remain. Now we'll ask you. How much was the children?
0.2%.
That's not good. Talk to me in 0.02.
0.2%.
No, that's not. Talk in English, everybody can understand. You don't know what 0.2% is. 2/10 of the total. That's very little. So, now, were most of the Jews in the Shibud, or were some of them in the Shibud? Most of them in the Shibud. Now, why did those Jews who didn't get out not get out? Were they all people who had patronim? Were they all feinschmeckers? Were they all the connected people? So if you take a look in the Rashi, in this week's Parsha, it says, in Perek Yud, Pasuk Chav Beis, you should take a look at that, it's how it'll help you sometimes. It says it was Choshech va'afela for 3 days. So the Rashi, V'lama hevi alein ha-choshech, Shahoyu bi Yisroel ba'oise ador rishayim, V'lo yahoyu roitzim lotzes. They didn't want to go out, and they died in Shloshis Yemei Hafei. Now the question you have to ask yourself is, the numbers that didn't make it out were huge numbers. We're talking about astronomical numbers. Even 20%, I mean, what are these people, crazy? What person who's in Shibud Mitzrayim doesn't want to get out? Now, maybe the people who are getting a little extras, people getting treated to extra meals, people getting some freedoms and liberties, maybe ula. But it comes out that most didn't want to get out. What is the pshat that they don't want to get out? So the answer is as follows. Was it always that they didn't want to get out? No. Originally, everybody wanted to get out. But as we mentioned, once the Makas began, which was a year before the Yetziah, what happened was the Shibud became eased. The Gemara in Rosh Hashanah Daf Yud Aleph says 6 months before it was canceled. So the Yidden knew they were getting out of Mitzrayim. The Yidden were aware that there was a Kabbalah, Pakad Yivkoi, that they were destined to get out of Mitzrayim. So now what happens? When a person sees the future, you know what happens now? Everybody starts to make plans for the future. You start planning for future, how we're going to run the country, how we're going to govern the people. You have to think of all the social needs of the people, how they're going to be satisfied, and so on and so forth. That's normal behavior. And the Jews started to begin to think about their future. And they could see that the country of Mitzrayim was being destroyed, and it was going to be rebuilt. They figured, what's wrong? Mitzrayim is not a bad place. Without the Mitzrayim, tremendous place. And those people, did not want to get out of Mitzrayim. That is where most of the people changed their minds, and they decided You know, we would rather stay here and rebuild our lives and rebuild our families and take a breather. It's far to country over here. This is the place we would like to stay. But not because they like to be tortured. So what was the Nakuda? For that Hashem kills them. Why did they get killed for that? Why did they get put to death? And this is one of the most fundamental Nakudis of Yetzias Mitzrayim. The Exodus from Egypt, as it's known in the world, is something that everybody universally acknowledges. Let my people go. The Jews got out, we got to let all the people out. Everybody's got to be emancipated. No one has the right to oppress anybody else, to occupy another person's country, to oppress. Everybody seeks freedom. Everybody wants independence. And there was a young bacher who was studying in a Mizrahi school, a modern Mizrahi school. And he came to my house, and I used to learn with him. And his father brought him to me that I should teach him something. So I decided to ask him, I said, tell me, my young friend, I said. His name was David. He said, David. I said, my young friend David. I said, do you learn Torah in that school? He said, of course. I said, do you know what we celebrate in the beginning after Purim? What holiday do we celebrate after Purim? And he said, oh, come on, like that's a question. Ask me. Pesach. I said, what are you celebrating on Pesach? He said, freedom. I said, freedom from what? Freedom from slavery. He said, what's wrong with slavery? No one should oppress anybody else. And I started to make believe I was laughing. And I laughed and I guffawed. I laughed so hard, I fell off the chair. And he's looking at me with his father like, what is this with this rabbi? He's crazy, like, what's that? I said, don't you get it? David, that's a lie. You were deceived. We didn't get out of Mitzrayim because we were oppressed. Servitude is part and parcel of being Jewish. The question is, whom do you serve? In whose service are you pressed into? Are you a service of Hashem, or are you the service of Mitzrayim? I said, when we were taken out of Mitzrayim, we are celebrating the fact that we became servants of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That now we can serve Hashem. Ein lecha ben chayrin ela misha oisik b'Torah. The greatest freedom is a person that has control over himself. A nation that has control over themselves. Over their independence. Everybody naturally, I said, everybody has a Yetzer Hara. That Yetzer Hara is, I want to be independent. I want to be what we call in Eretz Yisrael an Atzmai. I don't want to have any fear. I don't want to have any force to do anything. And Hashem says, you're now my avad. Zelacha ois. The Torah says, this is the ois. I showed him the Chumash. I said, you know what Hashem said? No, the sign of Yetzias Mitzrayim was? When you leave here, you're going straight to the Midbar. You're going to be Tavdun Esalikim Alahar Hazeh. You're becoming a commissioned servant forever and forever and forever. Neitzach Nitzachim. When Hashem saw that Klal Yisrael had different plans, they were thinking differently. They were thinking along different lines. They were thinking about independence. Let's set up an infrastructure. Let's set up our lifestyle over here. We'll rebuild. We'll do it the way we want. They forfeited their whole right to Yetzias Mitzrayim. That's what it means, Lo Ras. The person has to understand that his whole schus to be a Yid, to stay out of Mitzrayim and to stay alive, is insofar that he accepts upon himself that he is an Eved of HaKadosh Baruch. Now most people don't know this, well they forget it, but 30 years before Yetzias Mitzrayim, there was a group of people who were Yotzim in Mitzrayim on their own. Know what that was? Shevet Ephraim. You know how many people was in Shevet Ephraim? 200,000. 200,000. That's a lot of folks. That's a lot of pair of pants. That's a lot of shirts. And they decided they are leaving. They are not going to be impressed anymore. Enough is enough. We'll take it into our own hands. We don't need Moshe Rabbeinu. We don't need to go into some desert. Mekabel the Torah. We're out of here. Hashem said, "You not get out." Every one of them perish. Without Torah, without Moshe, they have no key. He said, that's the part they never taught you. What they taught you in your school was, they said to this young boy, is that freedom is an inherent right of every human being. And that's why they don't like slavery b'chlal. Every nation should be democratic, should be run by the people, for the people. No one should force himself religiously or forcefully, emotionally or physically on anybody else. That's what a person has to understand. That has nothing to do with Yetzias Mitzrayim. Now, we understand why the Torah brought Choshech. Choshech really was a little different. Choshech wasn't. That's what Chazal asking. Why was there Choshech? Choshech is not. It doesn't seem to be. It's incongruous with the destruction of Mitzrayim. But it was to separate, to be mevarer the wheat from the chaff. Those Yidden. Now, a Yid has to know. That's part of the nature of the Yetzer Hara that we have, the power that each one has in us, is that we don't want to be subjugated and subjected to the will of Hashem. Many of us don't want to really learn Torah. Many of us may not want to do mitzvahs. I always say, I thought about this many years ago, and it was frightening. Now, what would happen if HaKadosh Baruch Hu would say that for the next hour you could do whatever you want and you wouldn't be held responsible for it? Wouldn't go on your cheshbon. The next hour, asay masha ataroitzelotzes. How many people, or how many people you think would stay in the Gemara? I think we'd hear about the stampedes out the door, and people were trampled, running over each other, trying to chop around, if there was nothing, no peer pressure, and it was carte blanche, you could do what you wanted, that is. Let's say the guy could pick its time. So how many of us would pick time for Shachar, so you don't have to get out of bed, you don't have to put on tefillin, you don't have to be Mekabel Ol Malchus Shemayim. That would be frightening. Now, the Medrash fears us, an interesting thing. Now, HaKadosh Baruch had Rachmanis, so what he did was, he did the following. Now, I want to tell you something. I saw a very interesting Targum Yonis on the pasuk that says that in the 3 days, in the days of Choshech, Ulachol b'nei Yisroel ha'ya'or b'meishvaysim. See it inside. It's going to go in. Ulachol b'nei Yisroel ha'ya'or b'meishvaysim. Listen what he says. He says, Ulachol b'nei Yisroel Haven Nahoira, it was light, it was lit up. To bury the Rishoyim, Di Beinehim, Di Misa. And what else? This is what it says. Mamish, this blew my mind what it says. Vizako, they had a schus, Lemesoik, Bimitzvoso, to be Isaac, in mitzvahs, Bimois Vanehim, they were able, Bimois they now could do mitzvahs unchallenged, unworried. The world was quiet. It was Kumi Roini Balayla. They were able to be Isaac for 3 days in Torah mitzvahs. So I remember as a kid thinking, wow, I wish I was a Mitzrayim. I'd be running around all the Mitzrayim's house looking in their drawers. It says, are you able to see where they hid everything? So that you able to see their diamonds and their gold and their jewels and all the hidden items, so that later on when they came to collect, he says like this, they were zeichet to be Isaac b'Torah b'mitzvah. That was what Klal Yisroel wanted to do. Kiner mitzvah v'Torah or. That's what the Erlich Yidden wanted to do. Comes along the Medrash and says that this is exactly what is going to be la'asid lavai. You know? The chen la'asid lavai, it says. What's going to happen is going to be Yavai HaKadosh Baruch Hu Choshech. Because this Choshech, not the Mitzrayim, this Choshech, different Choshech. And in this Choshech, when Yidden are going to start feeling the time of the Geula, what's going to happen is it's going to cause a great upheaval. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people in Eretz Yisrael who are going to say, oh, Valdik, now I can go jogging in all hours of the day in all the hills of Jerusalem and Yehuda, and I don't have to worry anymore about some Arab jumping out and stabbing me in my ribs. I'm sure there's going to be Bachram that are going to say, now we could make a barbecue, kebab, we'll go out for a night, stay in the hills. I'm sure there are people who love nature, they can go out, now I can go wherever I want, how I want. And they'll make big plans. They'll open up camps, maybe they'll open up wilderness trips, and all kind of interesting things that right now you can't do. People will march in the street openly at all hours of the day and the night without fear of somebody sticking them. I'm sure they'll figure out what to do with the Arabs afterwards. Will we let them be part of the workforce, not part of the workforce? Do we want them here? All kind of plans. V'chein la'asid lavai yavi HaKadosh Baruch Hu Choshech shenemar, it says in the pasuk, ki hinei HaChoshech yichas ha'aretz. And in that Choshech, Hashem's going to make a biru, just like He did that. And then Hashem is going to give us a chance. When you have Choshech in the world, what do? You go to sleep and sleep for 3 days. Is that what you do? The Rambam says, "Umipnei zeh nis'avu kol Yisroel Nevi'im and the Chachamim Limois HaMashiach." You know why? Kedei sheyanuchu mimalchiyos. They should have the menucha of the malchiyos. She'einin manichin lehem lasik b'Torah b'mitzvos kahin. They don't get peace. The yimtzu lehem margoya, they'll finally have a little margoya, and they'll be able to do it. Abai said, Baruch Hashem, all of us sitting here, and all of us hearing this, descended not from apes and not from monkeys, as some people would like us to believe, but we descended on the best from the 0.2 of a percent or the 20% that grandpappies our granddaddies made a choice that they wanted to get out for the right reason. In our genes, we come from a pool where they decided in those 3 days in Mitzrayim, they weren't running around. They were doing the mitzvah of burying the mason, and they were doing mitzvahs in the Mashvoisam, the Revach, the Menucha, the Margoya, at ease and at rest. And now that Hashem's going to make the next biru. And the question is, are we going to be part of that biru next time? When the Choshech is going to Makas at Eretz, what are you going to say? Just because a guy says, I want to move to Israel, please, doesn't mean nothing. Doesn't a guy wants to go to Yisroel, now there's a way to go. You say, I'm moving away from France, Yisroel. Today anti-Semitism is rampant in the whole world. We already sing the Nevi'as of Al-Pnei Kol Echav Nafal, the Arabs, the Mamish, Shmuel is all over the place. With ISIS, in Philadelphia, Rabbeinu Shalom, on Erev Shabbos, a cop is sitting in his cop car. And a guy comes and tells him, Alua Akbar, he shoots him. You're doing this for ISIS. I'm doing this when he shoots the guy. Shoots him a bunch of times. But Hashem decided this guy shouldn't die. I don't know if he's having a policeman again. He's had nerve damage, but and I'm sure there are people in the bars in Tel Aviv. Say, Tel Aviv? They don't come to Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv, you don't ishtach people in Yerushalayim, maybe in Ranana, maybe in Afula, maybe in some crazy city, Akko. Tel Aviv? That's a city of Mamish. Such an urban city, it's such a metropolis, it's such a Sa'ir Be'im, Yisroel, everybody gets Mishal over there. Also, the guy goes to one of these bars. I read that this bar was one of these Ta'eva bars. It wasn't a regular bar. It's where people have funny conduct, hang out. And over there, as we decided, he smiled, and everybody was walking in. As he smiled, the guy was sitting there smiling, and everybody walking in. Leich Mishalem. They should listen closely. He didn't say Leich Lishon, Leich Mishalem, Leich Mishalem. And then he picked his gun up, started to shoot. Person they want Mashiach very badly. Everyone there wants Mashiach. But that's not the Mashiach we're looking for. And then it's going to be Choshech Chas Haaretz, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to decide. So we have to think about this. Now, one of the places to think about this, where do you think about this, is in the Olein. When we say Olein L'Shabeach, at the end of davening, we say, Al Kain, Mekavel L'cha Hashem L'keinu, Mekavel Fyu Hashem. And what do we want? Lirois Meheira B'Tiferes Uzech. We're looking for Hashem is Lirois Meheira B'Tiferes Uzecha. And what we're looking for is Lahavik Gilulim in Haaretz, V'Ha'lilim Karoisi Karesu, L'Sakin Oilom B'Malchus Shakai, V'Chol B'nei Basar, everybody, Yikru V'Shmecha. A lot of times I remind myself, even you. Don't think the fry guy. It means even you should be Yikru B'Shmecha. Lahavtei Selecha Kol Misha Yoretz, Yakiru V'Yedu Kol Yoshvei Seva, Ki L'chot Tichra Kol Berach, all knees will bow down to you. Ki Shava Koloshin, V'Necha Hashem Elikeinu, Yichru V'Yipoilu, V'Lechvoit Shimcha Yikor Yiteinu, V'Kabul Chulam is Ol Malchus. Now, what's Ol Malchus means? That a person will start doing the Ratzon of Hashem. Here's a person sitting alone in his house. Wakes up in the morning, you know what he says? I'm not in the mood. Somebody says, what are you not in the mood? I'm not in the mood to learn. I'm not in the mood to learn. Recently heard from somebody, told me, you know what? I would really like to be a guy. I'd like to be a guy. I don't look like a guy. I would like to be on my outside like I feel on my inside. So I don't. Honest fellow. That's a churban. That's a churban. That person never once said Aleinu. Never once did he say Aleinu in his life. How many people said Aleinu their entire lives and never once did they think that Hashem, I would like to have Yisroel to be, everybody should be mekablu aleim oil malchus shemayim. How many times does a person say, I'm not in the mood of learning Torah? How many times does a person say, I'm not in the mood of doing mitzvahs? That's the Choshech. That's the person who says, I'm not right to mekabel aleinu oil malchus shemayim. That's not my interest. And that's a very, very fundamental, crucial, and important point in our yadus. So, you have to daven for this. It's not going to happen on its own. It's not going to happen just one day wake up, he writes a little way, and he writes the last mitzvahs. You got to mechazik yourself. You got to face yourself, and you got to weigh the two sides. There's a side that doesn't want. What do? You mechazik yourself, don't give in to what you want to do. You mechazik yourself and say, what does Hashem want me to do? And you do what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants you to do. And then you do it, and you do it, and you do it. No, you finally feel good about it. Everybody has forced themselves, but he chose to force himself to sit and learn, and he's learned, or he forced himself to choose to do mitzvahs. Not somebody else forced him on his own. You know what he felt afterwards? Very good. How many times did I see people who are fried, no shaykhs, and they kept a Shabbos which they thought they couldn't keep, and they felt like $1 million afterwards? How many times did I see a person who was fried, no shaykhs to Torah, and somebody helped them navigate through a difficult Gemara for hours, and they didn't exhibit any ADD or ADHD. They didn't exhibit any shpilkis. How's a child? You know why? Because he chose to try. He chose to force himself. Of course you need the right conditions, but a person should exercise himself and work on himself. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I want to get to that place. And then we'll be Zoicher, V'hoya Hashem Melech HaKol Oretz, V'yima Hu Yiyeh Hashem Echad V'Shem Echad,